Oh, we're gonna go live. Hey, we're live.
Hello.
All right. Hello. It's Joy Foster, founder of Tech Pixies, and this is the Sparkle and Thrive podcast, which we film live on Facebook every week. We have switched our live filming times to Fridays at 10 a.m. So that way we can maximize the number of people who can join us. It's no longer conflicting with our social media coaching sessions, which are on Thursdays. So I'm delighted today on the Sparkle and Thrive podcast to have Padma Knowles, who is a tech pixie, but also a career a success advisor. And we have a lot of women who come through our program and who are thinking about joining our program who come from backgrounds of wanting to return to work, change careers, or start a business. And what Padma really specializes in is this area of changing careers. This is what she really is known for and has worked with hundreds, if not thousands of ladies, helping them return to work and change careers. So Padma, it's so wonderful for you to be here with us. Tell us a little bit more about you and also about how we met. That might be a great story for those who don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely to be here. Thanks, Joy. So yes, we met, well, first of all, my background is very much within recruitment and career coaching, and I've been doing that certainly in the recruitment for over 20 years now. So I've worked with lots and lots of people, but on the side, I also volunteer for a women's charity called SmartWorks, which the local one I'm near to is based in Reading, and it's all about empowering women back into work. So that's actually how I met Joy, because you came along, didn't you, to interview Sarah, the amazing Sarah Burns, who started the whole thing for SmartWorks in Reading, and that's how we met, and we ended up having quite a good conversation about values, actually, and working out your values. So that's how we met. So that's my background. And then really COVID hit, recruitment died a death for a while because a lot of my clients were in that events and music space. And since then, I've managed to pivot and take the career coaching online. So it all really started with Tech Pixies on that front. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, and I want to talk more about you, but I also want to spend just 1 minute on SmartWorks because you are one of their ambassadors. And I'm just looking at their website right now, and they say 65% of the women we help get a job within a month. And I know Reading has an even better result rate than that. But I've been to SmartWorks. I've walked around. That's where I met you. And what SmartWorks does is help women who are trying to get a job. Once they've secured an interview, you do interview training, and then you kit them out with a really nice outfit to wear to their interview. So it's all about giving them confidence on the inside and the outside to get that job, and it really makes a difference. And it's a wonderful charity. So I'm really glad that I got to meet you through that, because we also have another tech pixie who's connected to SmartWorks in the PR section. So that's a lot of fun as well. To have actually, we've got 3 SmartWorks ladies.
You have. I was going to say you've got another. Yeah. No, it's no. They're an amazing charity, and you get styled by professional stylists, and they're so good at what they do. They're so good because ultimately it's about how you feel inside. And that's a big part of getting a job and being successful in that interview. So that's and you're really looked after. Like, I can't tell you the difference it makes in people's lives. And then they then go on to meet an interview coach like myself, and I'm one of their national coaching champions. It's privilege, honestly. So we coach you through interviews, give you the techniques, and ultimately our job is when you leave, is to make you leave as the best version of yourself so that you can go and get that job. And it's a privilege, honestly. And I think it's over 70% of clients in Reading do go and get the job. And then when you've secured the job, you're actually invited back in for a second dressing, and the clothes are incredible.
I love that. So they do a celebratory.
So we give you a week's worth. We give you a week's worth of clothes. So you've basically got enough for a week's worth of work clothes, so that you're on your way. You get that hand that you need. And a lot of people don't come in because they feel like, I don't need it necessarily. But I've never known a woman to walk away from those clothes because they're fabulous. And the coaching in itself, the interview coaching, is priceless. So yeah, highly recommend them.
Yeah, no, I did a tour.
Yes.
There's a little bit of an echo, so I'm going to try and figure out what's okay. No, it seems to have gone away. I did a tour of it, and yeah, I was loving the clothes that were there and the jewelry. It's not just clothes. There's jewelry, there's purses, and it's a wonderful, wonderful organization and very much needed. So one of the things we did talk about when I did interview you when we were there were values. And when we talk to women about returning to work or changing career and even starting a business, we always say, have you done your values work? It's interesting, in our strategy module, one of the very first things we say is, have you checked in with your values? Because one of the big mistakes people make is they say, well, I'll just take whatever job comes my way. Especially women, they tend to do that more than men do. And they don't actually really get clear on what they want. And it's just so important to get clear on what you want. But part of getting clear on what you want is getting clear on who you are.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Why do you think values are so important? And how does someone tap into what their values really are so that they can start to find the work or the customers or the relationships, and they can start to attract those into their life?
I think you're absolutely right. Values, I think they're a game changer. And I think whether you're aware of them or not, we all operate by those values on some level. You might just not have realized it. So I almost see them as your personal moral compass, and it's how you want to live your life. And it's ultimately, if they're not met, your behavior is affected. If there's a value misalignment, it doesn't, often the phrase I hear is, it just doesn't feel right. Because often don't get me wrong, there are situations in a lot of people's lives, we've taken a job knowing it's not the forever job or whatever the forever job is, but circumstances, things happen, and that's okay, and we've all done that. But when it's still not to lose sight of what you really want is so important. And I think that's when your values really come into play. And if you can take the dream job, if on paper it looks the dream job, but if those values aren't met, it doesn't feel right, and you're never going to thrive in an environment where your values aren't met. And I think really good employers know this, and ultimately, they're very much talking about their values, but we're going beyond the words on a wall, the lovely words on a wall when you walk into a company, integrity and transparency. It doesn't mean anything, it's how they show up. So the good companies are talking about how they show up, because they realize they want to keep people. People want to keep good people, and you're going to do that if you hire for value alignment as well. So it works both ways. So I think taking stock of your values, because I think there's often this thing that you've got the joy at home and then the joy at work, but actually you're the same person. There's no separate joy. Do you know what I mean? Or we're all the same.
Well, I was laughing yesterday with a tech pixie who used to work for us, and I was laughing about how I think people who kind of work for tech pixies versus be a student at tech pixies, they see a different side of joy, and it's not intentional. But obviously, like, I go from being cool and calm and collected all the time to actually becoming very passionate about certain things, overly passionate. And that's part of me as well, growing as a business owner and growing into a leadership role, which I never, ever, ever saw myself as a CEO in my life. And that was not my plan. Never saw myself as a manager. That was not my plan. So it's really interesting it's important for people to understand. And this is, I say this all the time, and I know you 100% believe in this. When people are interviewing for a job, they're interviewing the company as much as the company is interviewing them. And people make the mistake that they're at the behest of the company, but actually you are in the driver's seat as to, do I vibe with this person? Do I like this person? Do I want to work with this person? And I think it's really important to understand that you're picking the company as much as they're picking you, and that's why the values matter. And Padma, I don't think a lot of companies are really clear on their values, or they put them down like randomly and never looked back at them. And that's where I think the work that we did with Mike Jennings, the entire team that we built the Sparkle values around, none of them exist anymore on the team as it stands. So if you look back at the picture that we took in 2000, probably 17, where we took the picture and we said, okay, these are the values of the company. I think there's one person in that picture who's still at the company, and that's Colby. But every once in a while we think, do we need to adjust those? Are they right? Whatever. But the process we went through was really wonderful in terms of getting to the point of, okay, here's our values and here's what matters to us. But I think, that process of what you want and what the company wants, they really have to align, and everyone can put their hand up right now and say, yep, I took that job where I knew it wasn't right. I stayed in it too long. Yeah, everyone's done it.
We have, and I think you're absolutely spot on. I think employers are becoming more aware of it. It's becoming more than just a word on a wall, like a lovely set of words that no one actually knows what they mean. And I think and I always say that to people, I was like, an interview is a two-way process. At the end of the day, an employer ultimately is more than a bum on a seat. It's so much more than a bum on a seat. If you've got an engaged employee, a really truly engaged employee, and that's where the value alignment comes in, they're ultimately more productive. You go above and beyond, don't you? Because you're passionate and you care. You don't need to be told. And if you go above and beyond, the customer experience is better, and ultimately the business is more profitable. And I think the good employees, I truly believe this, realize that employees are your first customer. And absolutely, they're your first customer. And if you can't get that right, it'll come back to bite you on the bottom.
That's a great point. I think that's so important. You've got to take care of your team, and then they take care of your customers. I think that's been the big shift, I think, from just a personal perspective, where it used to be me doing absolutely everything to then suddenly getting people in there to help. And then, making sure, not taking care of them. I think that's really important. And employee well-being programs are really important. One of the things that we put in place in the last year, which was really important, was mental health, just mental health availability. So everyone who works for Tech Pixies, whether they're a contractor or an employee, has access to 6 counseling sessions at no charge per year. And I think that's huge. And I think finding out when you are applying for a job, finding out about the benefits of the job, do they have a mental health policy? Do they have, and it's tough. How do you, and this goes back to those kind of tricky interview questions. Like, what if you took a career break due to mental health? What if you took a career break due to cancer? What if you took a career break due to looking after someone who's older? What if you took a career break looking after children? How do you A, account for those things? And then B, how do you talk about them in an interview? Because, for example, if you say to someone, this is my experience, I said, well, I want to know that it's got a good maternity leave policy. And when I was working with a recruiter, he stood me up, walked me out of the room and said, I can't help you anymore because I even asked the question. And this was in Switzerland, and it was about 10 years ago, but it's 11, 12 years ago, which you would not get away with today. But actually, do you think that still is happening today? And how do people bridge those conversations?
Gosh, such a good point. Yeah, a few points there. I think one is it's still happening today. I'm being really honest, on some level, of course it is. They just might not be able to ask the question as directly. There's no point me pretending that it doesn't happen. But what I also say to people is, if those things are happening, do you really want to work there anyway?
Yeah.
That's the truth, isn't it? It would only be a problem at some point for you, probably. You're the one who'd actually I've seen people, including myself, not with that particular issue, but put myself under pressure because I needed X, Y, and Z. I did at the time of my life. I put myself into situations where I've just thought, I need to make this work. I need to make this work. But ultimately, the person who's under the most amount of pressure is me, because I've put myself in that situation. And ultimately, I'm doing it for an employer that I really don't want to stay with. That's the truth. And actually missing out on a whole world of stuff out there that actually really could work for me. So I think, yes, to your point, yes, it's still happening. There's no point pretending it isn't. It's just hidden better sometimes. But on the flip side of that, I think a huge, huge amount of employers have moved so far forward on different levels. Like, the mental health topic that you brought up, COVID. That's one of the huge positives of COVID. Everybody is talking about mental health now. It's not swept under the carpet. So that's a huge thing. Companies have adjusted their policies, like TechPixies have. So they're adjusting, and it's not so taboo. People are talking about it more and more openly, but it's not. I saw a hashtag the other day actually going, mental health, just, how you get a puppy isn't for Christmas. I saw it said mental health isn't just for the pandemic. And I thought that's absolutely right. It's something we need to continue talking about and evolving, because it will evolve. So I think have those conversations. And I think a really good question to ask interviewers right now, what was your response to COVID? Because everybody was affected by COVID in some shape or form, whether it was that your business boomed. But, on the flip side of that, how did they treat their employees with all this extra work? Some people saw a massive downturn. How did they treat their employees? So it's a really good question to ask, because at the end of the day, that's when the humanness comes into play, and you can see how they ultimately treated people. So they're good questions to ask. And your other point about career breaks, again, there's been a shift there, a huge shift. LinkedIn as an example, they're adding new job titles on. I think they're coming in imminently, but stay-at-home parent, sabbatical, carer. There's lots of different titles, because I think people are just realizing it's life. It's actually just life. It's part of who you are, and I think that makes those conversations easier to have if you have had a gap for whatever reason. So I've heard lots of different opinions on this, but my genuine thoughts on this are just be honest, because if they're going to disregard you because of a gap, they're going to do it anyway. And do you want to work there?
There's a great question that's come up in the chat, which is, I applied for 2 jobs that were really aligned to who I was, and the values aligned, and I haven't even heard back from them. Now, it's interesting what you say, because actually if one of your values is getting back to people and the company doesn't get back to you, then actually your values aren't aligned in that way. And what might look good on paper, and this is another comment another comment on the live, someone said, well, I took a job and it looked perfect on paper, and then I get in there and it was totally hollow. The values were totally hollow, and it was nothing like what they said. And that, I think those 2 scenarios are so interesting, because I think that's happened to everyone. They've taken the job, it's been wrong, or they've gone for the job, never heard back. And actually, if one of your values is getting back to people, then working for a company that doesn't even bother to get back to you, says this isn't the right place for you to be, potentially. I mean, that would be my opinion.
But you're right. You're absolutely, because it's at the end of the day, if they're not living and breathing those values, and that's your first experience with them. So you're the customer, and that's your first experience with them. And you just think, and if I'm really honest with that first comment that you mentioned about that they didn't get back to you, I'd be emailing in just as feedback. I know I would. I'd be going, just so you know, this is one of your values, but actually you haven't actually got back to me. And if I don't know who it is, but that person's actually been for an interview as well. I mean, that's shocking, because you've given up time and things. So I definitely raised that. But again, you're right. They're not playing out their values, are they? They're just words at this point.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I wonder too, if you were to, really look at their values and then say, this doesn't align with your values. It's really interesting. I mean, I think the other thing too is to remember that we're all human, and we make mistakes, and we're not perfect. And, a value is very much a guidepost. Ideally, it's a good guidepost. It's one that helps you to stay the course. I know for sure, when there's ever issues, we kind of go, okay, does that align with the values or does it not? Was that situation handled within the construct of our values? And I've always talked about the authentic part of Sparkle. So supportive, positive, authentic relationships with women who are keen to learn and want to be empowered. The working with people who are keen to learn and the working with women who want to be empowered, that's easy, right? Being supportive and positive, that's easy. The authentic part is that one little one that's in there that's difficult, because it's that borderline between, okay, I have to be honest about what's happening in this situation, and and we have to do it with students and with employees. Fortunately, not very often, but it is one of those ones that is tricky. But it also shines through to being authentic about telling the story of the company, about being open about methods. I mean, a really funny situation where, I was we teach social media at Tech Pixies. That you've benefited from that. You've learned from it. One of the things we teach is the follow, unfollow method in Instagram, to kind of start to grow your following, to get that first 100, to get that first 500, to get that first 1,000. We're very specific about how you do it, and we don't break any rules or whatever. But I've had people like outright say, oh gosh, like you should never teach that method. And it's like, have you ever tried to grow an account from zero?
Yeah. It's gotta be,
Instagram? Like,
absolutely.
Let's be authentic about how we actually do it, and let's not hide how it's actually done. And so I find that really interesting. But let's talk about, so we've talked about like that interview question and dealing with it. There's a great podcast we did for people who are interested. We did a podcast about kind of how to talk about a career break on LinkedIn with a couple specialists. And I'm just thinking about which one that was, but I feel like it was around episode 35, 36, where we talked about that stuff. And also what to put on your LinkedIn profile. But I think you're right. I think getting really clear on how you want to talk about it, and then, having it available on your profiles and all that good stuff. And like you said, if people aren't going to hire you because of that, then you don't want to work for them anyway. And I think that's really important. Let's talk about something that I think no one talks about.
Yeah.
And as an employer and someone who hires contractors, something that I've really started to tune into, and I think partly because of the neuro coaching that I'm doing and everything else. Let's talk about energy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I find it interesting when I'm interviewing people for jobs or interviewing people for contracts. People bring energy to a conversation, to a room, whether it's a Zoom room or a real room. You bring energy, right? And what I'm starting to feel through being aware of the energy people bring is an energy of constriction and constraint, or an energy of abundance, of possibility, of openness, and an energy of closedness. So there's this real, I can really feel it now. I can feel whether someone's contracting or expanding, and that's really interesting, because I will talk to someone who has said, and I'm sure you've done this too, where they've said, I've applied for 20 jobs and I'm not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And you can feel the contraction, and everything's wrong. Like, no one's getting back to me, and I've applied and I've applied and I've applied. And you just know that the energy they're bringing into the room is this energy it's an energy of fear. It's an energy of contraction. It's an energy of, I'm probably not going to get this. I was saying to my son, he had a football match yesterday. They won 6-4, but they were down 3-1 at the start. And we were talking about this match, and I said, hey, you're going to get a hat trick, like as you do, like, I'm looking forward to watching your game. And he goes, Mom, I'll never get a hat trick. And I said, well, if you think that you're never going to get a hat trick, you won't get a hat trick. And I think that's the problem. If you walk into a job thinking there's no way I'm going to get this job anyway, you're not going to get the job, because that's the energy you bring in. So talk about
decided.
But the energy comes in through emails. It comes in through your CV, the language and the words that you use to describe yourself, to write, that brings that energy. So how do people shift energy if they're contracting and not expanding? What's something that you would recommend that they do?
Well, I can put myself so in that situation. So, if I take myself back to a year ago, just before I joined Tech Pixies, and I genuinely mean this, my business had gone down the pan. COVID had happened. It was a recruitment business. It's gone. And I was just like, oh my goodness, how am I going to pay any bills? There's no mortgage being covered. It was just, everything was, felt like it was just crashing down. And it was this fear, mindset of fear. I just couldn't see a way out. Honestly, I felt so stuck in it. And then truthfully, I was thinking about, and you see this in jobs as well. It's exactly the same thing. You've got this end goal, but it just seems so massive. It's just so massive and overwhelming. So you stay stuck in that place, and the energy that you have is awful with it, but you can't help it, because it's like a vicious cycle. You don't mean to be. I call them drains or radiators, and I was definitely a drain at that point. I know I was. And one of the biggest things that shifted for me over time has 100% helped me is surrounding myself with positive communities and people. This has been one of them, honestly, because your vibe raises, the energy raises, and slowly over time, your mind starts to believe what's possible. And you start looking at new things and new opportunities and think, oh yeah, I could potentially do that. Oh, actually, I could learn that new skill. And, you know, if I take myself back to a year ago, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much to learn. So much to learn. Whereas now it's like, I've still got loads to learn, but which bit can I fit in next? It's a total switch in my mind, and I can feel my energy is different. I can feel it. And I think I didn't really fully appreciate the energy you can bring into a Zoom room until I started your course, because I never thought how powerful online learning could be, because I've never done it before, to be honest. But the energy when you put into the breakout rooms, or you're on or in the chat, you know, when you send a quick message on the chat, you can tell, but you know, the tone and everything. So I think the biggest thing you can do to help yourself when you're looking for a new job or you're in that space is to surround yourself in the first instance by people who are positive and who are where you want to be. So you've got something to aspire to. I think that's really, really important. And I make a point of really trying to do that, because I just think it lifts me. It lifts me on, you know, on the horrible days, which we all have. And I think you bring that energy to an interview. So you could be saying all the right things. You can say absolutely everything textbook. But if the energy's not right, the click's not right, it doesn't feel right, that interviewer will be making that decision based on that. So you are responsible for the energy that you give. So I think it's really important before interview. I don't know if you've seen the Amy Cuddy, the video, the TEDx talk. She does the power stance before, and it's that one. But yeah, she does that, and I think she's changing her energy. She's shifting her energy, and I think that's something we can all do relatively quickly to help shift ourselves before we get into an interview situation, for sure.
Well, there's two things that I still there we go. It like takes a minute for me to be able to say. There's two things that I have seen or heard and applied. One of them is act the way you want to feel. You know, tell yourself, I'm going to act the way I want to feel. And here's one thing that I've learned. A perma smile goes a long way. Particularly online. So when I did Amy Porterfield's Digital Course Academy, she does some coaching around how to film your videos. And she says, you know, top tip here, you've got to bring double you. You've got to show up as double you. You know, you've got to be bigger than you normally are. You've got to be louder than you normally are. You've got to speak a little bit faster than you normally speak. You've got to bring this perma smile. She didn't say perma smile, but that's my thing that I've always said. But she did say smile while you talk. And there is something really pleasant about people who smile while they talk. They're enjoyable to watch. And if you watch any television programs, they actually are. They've got this perma smile on, because if you don't smile and you just talk like you would normally talk when you're normally walking, you know, the whole energy comes down. So this little tiny trick of just smile while you're talking makes a huge difference. And then you get this little twinkle in your eye, and that's where you have that connection with people. And that's where, you know, the power is in your hands, and that's, or in, you know, the power is in your body, in your eyes, in your face. And then you feel better. The other thing that I learned through the neurocoaching training that I've done is you can't have two feelings at the same time.
Yes.
So you can't have fear and power and empowerment at the same time. It's not possible. And I was speaking to someone yesterday who used to work for us, and we had a conversation about kind of letting go of needing to control everything the kids are doing and letting somebody else look after the kids so that she could get some time back. And it was very interesting, because she said, you know, when I realized that I couldn't be scared for my kids and happy for my kids at the same time, I just started to choose happy. I started to believe that when they were with someone else, they would be fine, and that I could get the time I needed. And now she's got this whole routine where she one day a week, someone picks her kids up from school after the after school clubs, and then she has a couple hours to herself, but then she also has a date with her husband. And, you know, it's a beautiful thing. And I really admire, and I was saying to her, I really admire the fact that you've put these things into place. But she said she couldn't put those into place until she realized she couldn't have the two thoughts at the same time. Yeah. And so when you are walking into an interview and you are nervous, or even when you're, and that's the other thing. So someone said, I'm getting physically ill thinking about an interview that I've got, right? And the thing is what's happening is this person's choosing.
Yes.
To every time they think about the interview, they think about how it could go wrong. They think about how they, what could they say that would just be the wrong thing, or what could they do? And actually what you want to be thinking about when this interview is coming up is, what if I said the right thing? What would the right thing be?
Best case scenario, always.
Yeah, what's the best case scenario? Let's go hang out in that room and constantly shift your focus. And this is what conscious living is like. You consciously change the way you're thinking. And most people live unconsciously. And we want people to start living consciously. They live subconsciously. We want them to start living consciously and start thinking, okay, I'm going into this interview. What's the best thing that could happen? What's the, and really map out how that's going to be the best experience. And I think that makes a huge shift in the energy.
Oh, it does. It does. I think it's focusing on what you want. At the end of the day, like you say, you've got a choice. You can either focus on all the stuff that's gone wrong in the past, but then you have no space left to think about what you actually want. And ultimately, it's what you focus on grows. So if you focus on what you want, you're going to get that outcome. Do you know what I mean? Ultimately, you'll get it. I don't know how, but you will get that outcome. But you can't focus on the mistakes of the past and the regret and all of those things, and the job that didn't work out, and the terrible manager, and then go into an interview thinking this could be the best thing ever. It just doesn't work like that. So you have to focus on what you want. And I think if you're going into an interview, or even I do it for my day, actually, I do it every day now. It's such a habit for me. I have like my my morning habits, my rituals, and then I go into and I play out and I visualize my day. I visualize, because I'm really learning about time management still. So I really, so I have to go, by 11 o'clock, I will have done this. And I play it all out of my mind and I visualize the best possible day. Whereas before it was waking up, sheer panic every day, sheer panic, because I haven't got time to, so I just play it out differently. And bit by bit, it's shifting, but the energy is different. But I think for interviews, play out the best possible scenario, because why can't it happen? Why can't it happen? You might as well focus on what you want. You might as well decide that and make the choice if that's where you want. Because someone was saying, I can't remember who said the same, but if you drive in a car and you're looking, if you need to focus on where you're going, because if you keep looking in the rear view mirror, you're just going to crash. And I was like, that's so true. It's so, so true. So just focus on the best possible outcome for that interview.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and one thing that's really important is a pattern interrupt, right? And this is something I learned from one of the coaches I've worked with, is as simple as, the first step is awareness, right? The first step is awareness. What am I thinking about the situation, whatever the situation is? What am I thinking about the scenario? What thoughts are coming up? And then the second step is the pattern interrupt. Because if we can't, a lot of times we feel like we can't get out of our cycle of whatever we're thinking. So it just snowballs and becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So the pattern interrupt is really important. So one of the coaches that I worked with taught me to go, stop it, just snap and stop it, just stop it. And then shift the focus to what you want. And that's the pattern interrupt. The other one that actually I've been working on with a client recently is a post-it interrupt. And it's really tapping into, let's say, 3 or 4 sentences that you believe or want to believe about yourself. That it's almost like a watered down brain prime, if you will.
Okay.
Where once because the thing is, the thoughts that come up are repeatable, right? When you start to be aware of the thoughts are going to be repeatable. So, for example, and I tell the story a lot. When we were going for, we went for a big loan. It was a social loan. So it's instead of taking investment, I knew the company was in a position that we could repay a loan, and I'd rather take a loan than additional investment. So I went out for some social enterprise kind of funding through a loan and grant scheme. And, we worked for a year. We worked for a year to get this funding, right? So it was a year in the making. The money came into money was about to come into the bank. I'd signed all the paperwork, and all of a sudden, we talk about ants, the automatic negative thoughts. They all come rushing in going, how are you going to repay this? Are you going to ever be able to repay this? This is a lot of money. Are you going to be able to pay this? Blah, 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 blah. So all these ants came coming in. And that's when I had to create a brain prime that was like, nope, you're going to be fine. You're going to, you're going to help, you're going to be able to help thousands more women as a result of this. And you're going to be able to, and so I had to focus on what I wanted and just do that shift. So yeah, so I definitely think like the post-it interrupt where you can write a few things that refocus you on what you want, getting your vision board out, making sure your vision board is visual. We talk about creating Canva vision boards at Tech Pixies where you look at your life, 10 years from now or 3 years from now or 5 years from now, and you kind of say, here's what I want. One of the analogies that I love, I'm doing an abundance course with Mary Morrissey at the moment. And one of the things that I love that she teaches is everything happens twice. So it happens first in your brain and then it happens in real life. And she gives the analogy of a projector, right? So you're watching a movie of your life, right? And she says, before you watch the movie, you get to put onto the slides of the projector, you get to put the pictures on. You get she goes, you get to choose your pictures and the movie hasn't started yet. So you get to change the pictures if you want. And then she kind of says, let's play this movie. And what do you see? What do you see in your relationships? What do you see in your, and of course she says the projector turns on and you can, if anyone's ever sat in a movie theater, and we haven't done that for like a year, but you know what that feels like when the projector turns on and it makes that noise and the light comes through and you've got your popcorn and, so it's your life. And she keeps saying, you're the star of your wonderful life. And, and you can see your relationships playing out. You can see your time and money management and you can see your, all those things. And she says, you don't go to the bank. This is what she says. You don't go to the bank and you say, I'd like a large amount of money, please. Right? You have to tell the bank what you want. If you want 100 pounds,
you have to be specific.
You got to be specific. And her point is, that's how life works. That's a rule of life. You've got to be specific about what you want. And if you're not specific about what you want, you got to spend time going inside and saying, what do I want? Right? What do I want? And then making that come reality. And that's what I love about you is you really genuinely believe that women should be in careers they love. I think
it's a right, not a privilege. I really, really think everyone has the right to do work that they love. I really do, because I just think it's not for the few. It's not for the few. No.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the fact that you said earlier on in this interview, you said your whole business bottomed out with COVID. You were in the recruitment business. And of course, recruitment went totally nuts this last year. Over 800,000 jobs have been lost. It's interesting. I heard a stat, Brene Brown and Melinda Gates did an incredibly powerful interview on Brene Brown's podcast, which I absolutely love. My mom's hero is Brene Brown. My hero is Melinda Gates. And it was like, the two heroes together. But it was a brilliant interview. And they talked about so many things in that interview, the importance of women, pursuing careers in politics, in tech, in finance, and also in media, that those 4 areas really, really need women in them. And they actually gave some statistic that that 100% of the job loss, now whether or not this is actually true, it seems a little bit strange, but 100% of the job loss in America in one particular month, it was like December or November of 2020, was female. So like the entire, and actually I think that's the COVID on one hand has made flexible working viable. It's made working from home viable in a way that wasn't possible before. However, what they pointed out on this podcast is, guess what? The biggest sufferers of COVID in terms of jobs are women. And actually, here's the other thing. The even bigger problem is women of color. And they're getting hit massively hard right now with their jobs because of the nature of many of the jobs that they take, and that's heartbreaking. And then to sit as to recognize that, okay, actually I can have a job that works online and flexibly and blah, 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 because of, there is a bit of white privilege there. So it's also acknowledging that. So I guess it's a bit of a mess. For some women, this has been a huge advantage. And for many women, this has been a huge disadvantage. But again, this goes back to, you are the thinker of your thoughts. And no matter which side of the story you're on, you look at the situation, which is, I want to return to work, change careers, start a business. And, what I loved about the book Power Hour, which is such a good book. Yeah. She's a woman of color. And she said, I have a huge disadvantage. I'm Black, I'm a woman. And, she said, and she listed all those things out. And she said, and I can look at that and be disheartened, or I can look at that and have it propel me forwards, And so obviously she is amazing and she's propelled herself forwards. But I think, and we got to interview her, which was absolutely inspirational for the Joy Book Club. But I just think it's a situation right now where women have to say, I'm in control of my destiny, and they've got to get in the driver's seat. Now, you rebuilt your business, and you coach women, getting them into the driver's seat, getting them in control of their careers. So talk to us about the program that you've set up, how it works, and what the key points of it are.
Yeah, so and it's you've really valid points there. I think women have been disproportionately affected, especially women from a BME background. And also, it's the sectors that women predominantly have worked in. They're the ones that have been hardest hit, and also, not in all situations, and I know this, but in a lot of situations with people working from home, even, if women have earned X amount and had a large income, because of the childcare responsibilities, their work has suffered more. And I know some very, they've had some very senior roles in corporate life. They've ended up resigning because they literally couldn't manage everything that was going on with COVID while the husband or partner, whoever, worked. So we have been massively affected. In terms of the program, I love it. So it's really empowering women to design their own version of career success. Because I think you so often get stuck in that, in that world where success only looks like one thing, either a job title or the amount of money you earn. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy having money. I absolutely do. But it's so much more than that. It's all the other things that come with it. And, one of the biggest things women have fought for so long is flexibility, all of those issues. And now, actually, because of COVID, they're easier conversations to have, much easier. The door's wide open on those conversations. So that box in a lot of ways has been ticked. So now is the perfect time, I think, to really go and create what you want. So we have 3 modules. We have the Dream It, Design It, and Do It modules. And it's an intensive program. And the Dream It is really thinking about where you want to go. It's what you talked about earlier. It's very much where you want to go, what that looks like, stepping into the movie theatre and coming up with the images. Because if the minute, I can't remember, I think it was like Steve Harvey who said, if you can see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. And I truly believe that. I think you've got to see it in your mind first. It really helps you stay on track. So we go through a lot of that work. We do the values work, really get clear on values. But, I know we touched on it earlier, but I think it's really important to remember that you and I, for example, might have the same word as a value, but our lens on that value might be very different. And I think it's getting really clear on how that value, what it means to you and how it shows up for you in the workplace, so you can have those conversations at interview. And I would encourage anyone to talk about values at interview. Because I've been in front of a CEO before and he couldn't remember his values. And I was just like, wow. Yeah, he's just really, he was really proud of the fact that the business had gone through this exercise where they'd be really trying to reshape the culture and gone through values. And I was like, well, what are they? Because your website obviously hadn't been updated, which is fine. And he couldn't remember all of them. And he was uncomfortable. And I obviously tried to play it down, but I just thought, that's not a company that's living and breathing them. If you can't, it's not even the words, it's how they show up. So that's a lot of the Dream It module. The Design It is really, it's a lot about your personal branding. It's about the pillars of who you are, your skills, your strengths, eking all those out. It's your LinkedIn. And, a lot of our work's around not just your LinkedIn profile, which is obviously really important and powerful, but it's leveraging LinkedIn, because I think 70% of jobs now, LinkedIn's so brilliant, but 70% of jobs now aren't even advertised. They're filled through LinkedIn before you do networks and connections. And actually, you can do a lot to make that happen. And if you're clear on what you want, you can start following businesses that you're interested in that are aligned to your values. So there's a lot of work you can do beforehand. So that's the design it module. And the do it module is very much that practical idea of, actually, it's the stuff people come to me for. It's my CV, my how to nail an interview. It's the doing it piece.
But I love that you end with the doing it piece. You don't start with the doing it piece. And this is very much the ethos of Tech Pixies. It's like, your problem with social media isn't what network to use and how to post, right? Your problem with social media is procrastination, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, right? And so, we know what people want. We know people want to know which network to use and, and what to post. Like, that's what they want. But actually what they need is that real understanding that unless you overcome your fears of rejection, overcome your fears of failure, overcome your fears of success, that doesn't matter. We can teach you all the different social media tricks in the world. It's not going to help. Just like what you're saying, I can teach you how to write a CV. I can teach you how to update your LinkedIn profile. I can teach you how to do an interview. But if you haven't done the inner work, it's going to reflect, the outer work's not going to reflect it. So I love that you do that. And you've got these 3 pillars and you work with people through your coaching program, a group coaching program, and also one-on-one.
Yeah, there is there's a group coaching program. That's the intense one. And I had someone actually who's just finished, and I was asking for feedback and stuff the other week, and she was like, she couldn't understand, just to your point, she couldn't understand how I did the do it bit at the end. And she just said, now I totally get it. She goes, because the do it bit, the energy, like onto your point, the energy that you bring in if you did that first isn't going to get you what you want. And also you don't maybe know what you want because you haven't taken the time to dream it out. So it's all those pieces. So she's transformed her life. It's brilliant. She's absolutely transformed her life. She's done the work. She's transformed her life, and she's gone and got exactly what she wanted. So I'm really pleased for her. But
that you said something really special there. You said people don't take the time to dream it out.
Yeah.
And I think everyone listening right now that's important. You've got to take the time to dream it out, because the visualization or the vision for your future, it doesn't come to you when you're busy, and you're doing everything all the time. It's actually the visualization and the dream comes to you when you actually sit quietly and let yourself open up to it. And there's exercises you can do, like our visualization exercise, and you have exercises that people can do. What is an exercise? Because I'll be honest, visualization's been something that I really struggled with. And part of this has come from, I've talked before about going for the US archery team. I used to play the Olympic theme in my car, and I would imagine what it was like to walk out into the Olympic stadium and, hear the music with the flags and walk around I imagined what it was like to shoot in the Olympics. I imagined what it was like to stand on the podium. So I had this super crystal clear vision and of what I wanted and of what I could see. And I repeated it over and over again, but then never got it. And then it was actually very challenging for me to allow myself to dream like that again. Because when you do dream so heavily and so strongly about something, and then it just doesn't happen, that's your big failure. You're like, okay, well, I spent all that time, I did everything I was supposed to do, and then it didn't happen. And I know now with the neurocoaching training I've had that there's some things I could have done differently besides just visualizing. Because here's the thing: if your brain doesn't believe the vision, you could create this whole vision, but if your brain doesn't believe it's possible, you could sit there watching the movie and think, oh, well, that's somebody else, subconsciously. And I think that's a little bit of what was happening. But I think what made it difficult for me, I kind of describe it like just fog. Sometimes I'll sit there and I'll try and really see what the future looks like. And I was like, I just see fog. And there was in one of the groups I was in, someone posted a picture of rain clouds and then this really beautiful rainbow coming through. And they're like, that I finally see, the clouds are starting to part, or I can see that. Yeah. And so what tips do you have for people who are struggling with that dream it part? Because that's such an important part of everyone's future.
It is. And if I'm honest, it's the module, because part of it, you also get a couple of one-on-one coaching calls for myself, part of the bigger package. And often we go back to that piece because, like you say, people struggle with that. But I think, which I didn't mention actually, but one of the big pieces we do as part of that module even is working out your why. And it's so much, a lot of people will say to me, it's, my children, it's obviously my children mean the world to me, but that isn't necessarily linked to my work, if I'm truly honest. Do you know what I mean? It is in some ways, but really it's my why, it's the reason I do things. And for me, when I go back, and we do a lot of exercises around this, and this is kind of where we start with it, it's working out your why. And we go back to the past and things you've done, and we pull out different experiences. And without us realizing, often there's real common threads running throughout. And when you pull them apart and pull them out, and put them together, a lot of the why becomes really clear. And then from that point onwards, we do the visualization piece. Because I think that in career terms, I think it helps people. It doesn't necessarily say, this is the job I'm going to do. What it does is tell you why. Like for me, mine was all about equality for women. I had a very lovely upbringing, but it was a very traditional Asian upbringing. And women, it was very different in my household. And I always remember having this thing of it's just unfair for women. It's just unfair. And I didn't realize how much of a huge impact that has had on my life in so many ways, in a positive way though. And so that's a really big thing for me. What my why is really to help women find their confidence and give them an equal level playing field. And that's what it is. And then the work I do is linked to that why, and that's what keeps you going. And once you get clear on your why, I think the dream it part becomes not easy, but definitely easier, because you can always link it back.
That's really interesting. And what's really a really strange thing happened to me yesterday, and I had agreed to do this kind of this call with someone. It was kind of a networking call. She was doing a project where she wanted to build up this directory of women-owned businesses so that women could buy from women. Like a lot of times people don't realize how many businesses, very successful businesses, are actually owned by women. And so anyway, we were chatting, and I just had offered to help. We were on another call together, and I said, look, I'm happy to, help you think through this, because I've built those kind of websites before. And I'm obviously a huge fan of women-owned businesses, et cetera. And she gets on the phone, and it turns out she was the co-founder of one of the biggest companies that we all know, a household brand. And I had not put two and two together. I mean, I eventually put two and two together, but I didn't put two and two together before the call. And one of the things that I know about what I want to do is I've always wanted to do a kind of humanitarian work, and I've got very specific people that I want to do that work with, and I've talked about that a lot. But it's interesting because I got to a point where I was like, until I am financially empowered and independent as an individual, I'm not going to be able to do that kind of work, because it's important for me to take care of the things I need to take care of right now. So as you say that, and when I tap into my why, it's like, well, I want to build what I want to build so that the second half of my life, so that the second half of my life, I can do this work that I've always wanted to do in my life. To me, I see that when I look at the people who are doing that work, I see the route that they did to get there, and that's the route I'm on, and that goes, okay, that's what I want to do. But it's so much fun to talk to people who do their work really well, because you can unlock new thoughts in someone. Just even this, and it's a little bit, I feel like sometimes these calls are people that's sitting in on my therapy sessions, but I don't do therapy sessions, but my coaching sessions.
That's what my course is like. I love it. I absolutely love it. You get to, you really delve. I love it.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify. I mean, obviously I'm in therapy, is nothing wrong with therapy, but I focus on coaching rather than therapy. So, what I'm saying is, it's so funny because sometimes these interviews, I start talking about my own stuff and forget, hey, we're on a call and it's live and people are watching. Speaking of that, it is live and we are on Facebook and people are watching and asking questions. So this is the time where we say question and answer open to those of you who have been sitting here watching live. So thank you first and foremost for being here live with us. It's wonderful to have you here. So if you have questions, drop them in. Tracy says, I've got an interview for a job I really want next week. I've been out of work for 7 years. It's a trainee content design position with the civil service. Padma, what are your best tips for me to prepare?
Focus on the skill. If it's civil service, I would imagine it'd be quite a rigid competency-based interview. I'm guessing here, but usually the bigger the organisation, especially public sector, they tend to focus on these competency-based styled interviews because from a fairness perspective, so basically everybody gets asked the same questions. So usually what would happen is on that job description that I hope you have, there will be a competency section, and those are the questions that they're going to ask you in a nutshell. So I haven't got it in front of me, obviously, but so you need to look at the core competencies on that job spec and think of, I always say, at least 2 really strong examples that where you can showcase those skills and competencies. And when you're talking about those competencies, it's using the STAR framework, which I'm sure if you don't know, it's situation, task, action, result. I'll talk through that, but it's very specific technique to answer these questions. So it's A, what competencies is the job spec looking for? B, where do I have that skill or competency from? And then have 2 examples to showcase it. Then use the STAR technique to answer it. It's very, very specific way of doing it.
She said, if it's a trainee position, it's not competency based. So how would you advise?
Then I would, very simple, I would look at the job spec in terms of what they're looking for you to do. Like, and people complicate this process, but I think make it really simple and simple. And I think look at what they actually want you to do. Have your CV ready and think, where have I done that before? Really simply, it's just a case of cross-referencing where you've done that before. And, you know, I don't know what the style will be because, as you say, it's trainee. But if it is casual, when you're talking about your previous experience, please tell them the relevant experience that you've got. You know, and if it's a new skill that you've learned, you know, maybe on TechPixies or wherever it might be, talk about it. Talk about it. Don't just assume they don't know anything about you, because they don't.
Well, I always think that in job interviews, when you can talk about where you've actively upskilled, where you've actively sought training for yourself, because here's the thing, a lot of people don't get themselves upskilled. A lot of people don't go and do additional training. And one of the things that I teach people who've done TechPixies is to think about the fact that in a 12-week period, you've been exposed to at least 9 different pieces of technology, right? Yeah, so when you're going into an interview and they're saying, do you know how to use this piece of technology? And maybe the answer is I don't, but here's the actual answer. The answer is, I don't know how to use that piece of technology specifically yet, but in a 9-week period or in a 12-week period, I learned how to use 9 different pieces of technology. I feel pretty competent with all of them. I also feel very confident that confident that I can go and learn another piece of technology. Like, I have no fear of learning a new piece of technology. And what that demonstrates is the mindset you have around learning something new, right? 100%. And around being...
It's 100%. It's those skills. It's the fact that you've learned new skills. And I say this to so many people because they won't apply for a job unless they've got all the skills. But I always say, no one has ever applied for a job having all of the skills. ever. We haven't. I don't know a person that when we all started out, we didn't have all the skills. So it's no different now. But the fact that, you know, that's really powerful what you've just said. The fact that anyone who's done TechPixies has learnt these skills in a relatively short space of time and had the mindset towards doing that, so you can absolutely do it again. And the power of yet, absolutely, the fact that you haven't got it yet.
Yeah, and there's another question here that says, any tips on interviewing on Zoom apart from smiling lots?
Yes, I've done a little video on this because I kept on getting asked about it. So Background, I'd say always think about your background. Think about what you've got on show. And I actually say to people, I'm not a good example of this because I'm in the process of, this is our dream wall, mine and the girls' dream wall. We're repainting, doing things. But I usually say, try and have like a picture of whatever, something personal to you. Doesn't have to be family, but it could be like somewhere you've been maybe, or a place, whatever it is, because it could be an easy talking point. Because when you have a face-to-face interview, it's much easier in person to create that moment of connection, whether it's they're making you a coffee or, whatever it might, or the weather, whatever it is. So it's kind of down to you in a Zoom interview to create that moment of connection. So have that ready. Lighting, obviously make sure they can see you, always helps. Test the tech before. I always say prep the tech before. I'm guilty of this. I just like battery. Like I was running a live webinar and my battery died halfway through. That was not good. That was fun. So yeah, test your battery, lighting, background. Ultimately, one of the benefits of Zoom is they don't know that you could have lots of post-its all around the side. So you can have
your own talking points.
Yes,
yeah, and
specific points you don't want to forget. Like I should have done, but you can have them around the side, so you want to mention that specific thing.
I love that. Okay, and the other thing too that I would say is a top tip, and this is just my experience from being in interviews with people, try and avoid filming, doing the video Zoom in your bedroom. I see that a lot. And then I also would say, try and find a decluttered space. You want the space behind you to be, really decluttered. And I think that's very important. I've seen people just with piles of stuff behind them, and you just think, actually put on the virtual background, or get to a place where you've got a decluttered space behind you, because it's distracting for the person who's interviewing you. And I'm sitting here kind of thinking, oh, I need to move over there because I've got that one little thing there. But the point is just be aware of your background. Now, Padma, I could talk to you forever, and I know people would love to keep listening to you. I have to go because I have we've got ladies waiting for a coaching call.
Yes.
But I want to say thank you so much for your time today, for your tips today. And for any of you who are looking to return to work or change careers, particularly those two things, Padma is a wealth of knowledge. She's also started her own business, so she's got a lot of knowledge around that as well. So I would definitely be following Padma. I would be direct messaging Padma. I'd be connecting with Padma. If I was looking for a job right now, I know who I would be working with as my coach. So unfortunately for me, I'm not looking for a job right now, but I know lots of women who are. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And we will definitely for sure have you back on the podcast again, because you're just such a great guest to have, and you give such great advice and with such a genuine heart. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for everything.